All right, welcome. My name is Ken Cerny, and this is Icarus Tales, stories of surviving our egos. And if you don't know the story of Icarus, he's a young man who was captured with his father being an inventor. They were being held in a prison, and they escaped the prison by building a pair of wings out of feathers that they found on the ground and wax. His father, being a smart guy, gave advice to his son not to fly too close to the sun or it would melt his wings. Um, Being a young aviator that he was, he let his ego get the better of him, flew too high, his wings melted, and he crashed and died. Obviously, it's a Greek myth, but I think it sets the tone pretty nicely for what we're here to do today, just kind of give some advice. So we're going to talk about stories. You know, with some of us older people, and Wade here, maybe not as old as I am, but he's been around a long time too.
Trying to catch up.
Yeah. We got Wade Cook here. He's chief pilot with PHI Health. And I asked him to come and tell one of his stories of when he found himself in a situation that he didn't necessarily want to be in, either because he put himself there or because that's just where it was. And then a little bit about how you think your personality had something to do with getting you out of that situation, or maybe even getting you into the situation. I've done it both ways over the years. So I'll let you introduce yourself first, and then we'll move on to the story.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Well, thanks for having me. As he said, my name is Wade Cook. I've been the chief pilot for PHI Health for about 8 years. I'm in my 21st year with PHI, a civilian trained pilot. I did the typical flight school to flight instructor route.
That always is curious. I'm always curious about that concept, but okay.
Yeah, and it was my first of what I hope are many midlife crises. I was about 30 when I decided to start flying as a career.
Oh, wow.
And it was just on there was no real plans. It was just what if. And there was a short tour flying some corporate for a lawyer, but it was pretty low corporate. I was flying an R-44. And I was flying a Cessna Skymaster. So I was flying a helicopter that most corporate people turn their noses up to. And a Cessna Skymaster is a push-pull twin.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
a
yeah.
centerline thrust twin. And it's slow, but it makes up for it by being ugly. So, but it got me to a place that I wouldn't have been otherwise. And before I came to PHI, and it filled a nice niche gap and gave me some experiences I wouldn't have had otherwise. So,
well, neat. And now you're the chief pilot.
And now I'm the chief pilot. Yeah,
now, you also instruct too, don't you?
I did. I grew up at PHI as a line pilot in the Gulf of Mexico. Then I got in the training department pretty early on, and I've really grown up in the training department with PHI. So
Yeah.
that's really been my career as a trainer of pilots. The ironic part of the place that I'm in now is prior to flying, I worked as a clinician. I was a paramedic on the ground. I was a paramedic on a helicopter, and that's really kind of what got me into flying. One of our other paramedics there said, you should learn to fly because it's fun and it's cheap. And that kind of got me down the path of this. There was no plan to be a pilot as a career. It's just trying to do something else along the way.
Yeah, it's funny the way things go. I read, growing up, I was reading all the kinds of books of pilots in World War II and all the stories that were going on. And I lived just outside of Oshkosh most of my life. So I watched airplanes flying over my head all the time going into the air show up there. And yeah, it's like I wanted to fly. I had no money.
Yeah.
I didn't know way I did it. So I ended up going the military way. And that wasn't even a plan.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of happened for me. But anyways, so yeah, what kind of story you got for us today?
Well, like I told you, stories really, I mean, I've spent my entire career trying to keep people out of stories as an instructor pilot,
Yeah.
as a check pilot. I ended up in a standardization role. And then of course, now in my role as chief pilot, you try to equip people so they don't have to tell stories. I interview a lot of pilots, and one of the questions I ask all pilots is, I say, every pilot has a story they love to tell, right? I mean, how do you know you're in a room with a pilot? They'll tell you.
That's right.
But so every pilot has a story they have in their back pocket, they're ready to tell. Most pilots have a second story they hope they never have to tell again. It's the high and low of aviation,
Yeah.
And but nobody's ever asked me that question directly. What's the story that really kind of got my attention. I'm sure there's several examples, and I'm sure ego was a part of it. But the story that as we're having this conversation, the story that comes to mind where I really scared myself as a pilot was my very, very first commercial flight. Flight as a commercial pilot. It was the first flight where somebody's going to pay me to move a helicopter.
Okay.
And that was the story. And at the end of that, that's one of those things where I really felt like this is how I'm going to die. You have that. They'll say that's a stressor. The people that do all the peer support and they say if you've ever had that moment where you think you're going to die, that's a different event. And but I don't think it was confidence or overconfidence that got me there. I think it was just inexperience, and not being where I needed to be. And the story on that, I mean, is that something we can dig into?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I said, boom, it's happened with the other guys I talked to too. It's like, as you're talking, it's like, holy crap, that's happened. I had that moment myself too. And for me, I was a young lieutenant. I was in charge of a platoon of Cobra pilots. So these guys are all much more experienced than I am, and we're going to be they just made a brand new pilot in command out of one of our CW or our W01s, wobbly ones they call them.
Oh, nice.
So they just made a brand new pilot in command, and so I'd been there probably 6 or 8 months and a little bit confident myself. And I tell you, he was not a confident pilot. He was a very nervous pilot. And that was the first time I felt, man, you might have to take control if this goes a weird way.
Yeah.
Now, I understand he got a lot better. I talked to one of his instructors that had him way down the road. But I think they forced him into it just a tad early. And it's like, I felt the same way. It's like, holy crap, this is going to be on me here, the way things are going here. And if when something was happening, I'd be flying a little bit. All of a sudden, he's on the controls. He's all freaked out because he didn't see something. I said, oh, no, that's just whatever it was. So, yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. So I know you're talking about, you've done some of these personality assessments, and we'll talk about that again at a different time. But how do you think your personality had, what did that have to do with, what do you think that had to do with that thought or in the future?
Well, as far as that particular event, I think I was not a kid. I was 30, 31 years old, somewhere in there, maybe 32. You have some life experiences, you have some highs and lows. I think part of the personality probably let me continue to work the problem, as opposed to resignation.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't quit fighting when you find yourself in a situation you don't want to be in. It's not a there's an adage about, if you're in a boxing rink, you want to stay off the ropes, but you want to stay off the floor more, right? So whatever you do, you have to keep working to
bounce back.
Yeah, and if you get on the floor, you got to get up, because once you quit trying, what's the old adage? You always fly the aircraft as far into the crash as you can.
Yeah.
If you think you have to crash, you don't quit flying before you get there.
Yeah. Don't never quit flying.
Don't never throw in the towel.
Always continue flying. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think personality helped to that one. I mean, I was I think by design, I'm fairly risk averse, but I'm also fairly confident. If I know something, if I feel good about something, I'm okay to take a lead role or to step into a mentorship type of role. So I think that personality probably paid into that as well.
Well, the class I did here at Heli-Expo this year talked about hazardous attitudes, and then they add in a personality, some thought about personalities, using what I call the essential motivators. And as you're talking here and you're having a hard time, I can see one of the reasons why the stabilizer personality type is stabilizer personality type is very structured.
Yeah.
It's a very structured personality type. It's a very organized personality type. They like rules and regulations. They live by those rules and regulations. They have a really hard time stepping out of that role of following rules and regulations. And during that talk that I did here, the next step that gets in the way of good thinking is stress.
Mm-hmm.
And as stress starts to increase, every time something new adds in there and there's something more added to it, initially stress is a good thing.
Sure, fight or
You
flight.
really start looking and focusing, and you're really strong in what you're doing. But as it gets worse, you start going into more of the subconscious. More of your ego starts to take over, and you don't even know that's happening. And there comes a point where it can actually shut down your brain. And I know Tanya Glenn talks about that, if you've ever heard her talking about PTSD and shutting down your brain. The same thing happens before you get into that accident that causes that PTSD. Sure. And there's a book called The Stress Effect that talks about that. But one of the things that stresses out a stabilizer is when you can't focus, or when you can't get back, when things start getting out of control. And you no longer have that logical control going on. Mm-hmm. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever
yes. And then I go back to, my past life. I worked as a paramedic for many years, and oftentimes your whole job is to take a bad situation and make it better.
Yeah.
Crowd control, scene control. There's mass chaos. You're supposed to come in and, reach into the jaws of death and pull somebody out. And then make their bad day better. So that's also a piece of my personality. I think I'm very structured. Again, I'm a middle child.
Yep.
I got onto a volunteer fire department when I was in high school. Right, I'm pretty straight-laced. I've always been that way. And if there's a rule, okay, I don't have to agree with it, but there's a rule, so I'm going to follow it. And that fits so well to what I do. But that crowd control mentality also, sometimes I've found myself thinking, everybody that's not me needs to leave, because I'm going to make this better, right? So that's a bit of an ego.
You're hitting what I'm talking about right around the head.
Yeah, because y'all are messing up my world, and if I can get this back in order if you just get away.
Chaos is not your friend.
No, absolutely.
So down in the middle of the floor downstairs is probably not a happy place for you necessarily. Although
it's just noise. It's just white noise. Yeah, I do appreciate the quiet sometimes.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean, that's kind of where we're getting at here.
We are.
Yep. I pull it out of there.
There you go.
But the other thing about the stabilizers, and it's something that I bring up in the classes, is that they have a tendency to lean towards training and leadership, simply because what's really neat about them is they have a really unique way of taking care of people by taking care of the organization, by making it a structured organization. Mm-hmm. And so, you fit the bill well.
Well, thank you very much.
There's a reason why you're where you're at, and it's all you.
I looked around and I'm like, somebody mistakes me for an adult just because of my age, right? If they only knew what's going on in my mind.
You make everybody look up to you.
Thank you very much.
That's all I can say.
I appreciate that.
You're that tall.
Yeah, true.
Anything else come to mind?
As an instructor pilot, as a trainer, you get very confident in your abilities.
Yeah.
You get confident in the abilities of your peers. And there's always a story about two instructors should never go fly with each other, right? Yes. And it's not the hey, watch this,
yes,
or hey, I bet I can do this and you can't. There's always some benefit to gain for some gaming like that, but if you're not careful, you drop your guard that you would normally have with another pilot because of confidence in their abilities,
yeah.
And so you don't brief things properly. You don't protect the environment as well as you would. You're not nearly as on guard. And an example was, I was flying, and you probably know the gentleman, but Eric I. Austin, who was one of our check airmen. He got me. He was instrumental in getting me into the training department. And I'm due for a check ride, or he's due for a check ride, and we're out there doing auto rotations. As part of it's a training, part of it's the check, and we just didn't brief the maneuver real good, and we had no intention of. On this particular maneuver of doing an auto rotation to the ground, but we didn't brief who was going to recover, when the recovery was going to happen, who's in charge, and
who's teaching who.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't remember which seat I was in, but as we're passing about 100 feet, we realized we've got no choice. We weren't in the most ideal situation, And it
Yeah.
worked out. And that goes back to good training and confidence, and not setting yourself up wrong from the start, even if you weren't planning on going to the ground, you still
Right.
have somewhere to go. You weren't in a bad place. So it worked out. But at the end of that, we both learned that, we both dropped our guard. We were both way too laissez-faire, if you will, in the cockpit. We were way too casual. And that could have turned out bad just because we didn't do what we do every day, which puts me right back into my little center point of wanting to be square and structured.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we could go on that one all day long.
I think so.
That's a really good comment, and it's a good way to end our discussion, I think.
Well, I hope that is good. Thank
But
you.
we'll come back at some point, and I'll give you a call when that report comes in, and we'll see just how close we are to what we just talked about
The
here.
personality, see how
Yeah.
close we nailed it.
We'll see if you fit the mold.
I think I will. We'll see. I'll get that done for you this evening.
Okay.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, I tell you what. Thanks for doing this. And there's Wade Cook, Chief Pilot with PHI Health. I've known you since I think I first met you in the
training department. Yeah.
Down there in Lafayette.
Circa about 07 or 08, probably.
It would have been 08 when we started,
Yeah.
and they rammed us through that 407 transition. It's like, and going from a 206 to that L1, it was like, holy cow! It said, well, pull more power. Wow.
Yeah. I was big in that 407 market at that point.
Yeah.
So
that was pretty neat.
But I had some of my experiences as well there. Thanks, Ken.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much.